Thank you so much. Yep. So my name's Kim. My pronouns are she, her. I am a reasonably tall lady in her late 20s now, with mid-length curly hair that's tied up, and I'm wearing glasses, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Sophie Hinde. I am the Heritage Manager at Dundee Heritage Trust. My pronouns are she, her, and I am in my early 30s with a blonde bob, and I'm wearing a navy dress. So this is our presentation about community feedback.
So we're going to start with sort of discussing the problem, the thing that we were setting out to tackle. We'll then talk about what we did to open up the doors, how we prioritized the wealth of information that we got from that, and then we'll talk about how we started to integrate collaboration into the way that we went about and are tackling those problems.
So just a little bit about us. So we are Dundee Heritage Trust. We look after 2 sites in Dundee. So we've got Discovery Point, which is the home of the RS Discovery. That's the UK's first commissioned research ship for Antarctica. She took Robert Falcon Scott and Ernest Shackleton to the Antarctic for the first time. At the museum, we've got 12 interactive galleries which explore the expeditions of the ship in more detail. And then we've also got Verdant Works, which is very different. It's a museum in a jute mill. And we share the time when jute was a key industry in Dundee from mid-1800s until the decline in the late 1990s. We are a relatively small team that look after both the sites, and we're also literally just about to start a large capital project called Discovery Point Transformed. And we will be revitalising the 12 current galleries and creating 2 new galleries down at Discovery Point. Alongside that project, we're also wildly aware that Verdant Works opened as a museum 30 years ago and has not been significantly changed since. We've got galleries that talk of colonisation of South Asia in outdated language and from a coloniser's perspective. So we're figuring out how to do 2 projects at the same time.
Which is a great plan. So, is the problem too big? As Sophie said, we're about to tackle a multi-million-pound redevelopment. We also have really strong visitor feedback there. People love the museum. And we haven't really seen an abnormal dip in numbers with the museum getting older and more tired in places. However, there were several problem areas that were cropping up. So we had some of our technology fail. We have some areas which were severely lacking additional context, and we had absolutely no budget to do this with.
I think we swapped places, haven't we? Sorry.
Did I miss anything?
No.
In which case, sticking with me. Disruption nights. So we ran a series of these, and if you can't grab Sophie or I, Kerry is in the room. Kerry, give us a wave. Kerry ran an amazing sort of mini disruption night after this first main one with a group of service users from the institution she was working at. So she fully understands the process and is a disruption night convert. But what is a disruption night? So we did a few team walkarounds as a heritage team, attempting to sort of figure out where we thought might be the right area to start, what are the things that we can tackle easily, just a new panel somewhere, or, stick a label over something so it doesn't say something horrible anymore. We sort of did one of those walkarounds, and we got to the second gallery and we'd spent 2 hours. So we figured out that wasn't going to be the best way to go about it. We were very much talking within ourselves, and we needed some sort of external perspective on the situation. We had an amazing DJ CAD intern. So DJ CAD is our local art school that's associated with the college, and Kate Wilson was doing her master's there, and she came on placement with us basically for the whole summer, and it accumulated in a disruption night. Now, the naming was my idea, and our lovely boss Emma was away on holiday at the moment, and it just got put into her diary as a disruption night, and I am very thankful for her trust in me that I didn't immediately get fired. But the whole point of the name is that people don't go in thinking that they have to give a certain type of feedback. Often when you're asked for feedback from a museum, you're given it by a person and they're stood here like this, watching over you while you do it, or they're stood sort of close by and you sort of feel like you have to be a little bit polite. We wanted to erase that idea entirely and completely. So you start with a name that tells the people that are coming in that we don't want whatever you're normally telling people. We want your really honest thoughts. So the first step was running a test with Kate's peers. So she brought some people from her class around and they did the rose, thorn and bud method. So that's a different coloured post-it note for ideas, things that are great, things that have potential, and things that are a thorn in the side. Afterwards, this was done after the museum had closed at night, and afterwards we sort of sat in our learning space. Kate had brought them some beers and we had a nice chat. It was great. We got so much from it, but we were also aware that that was a small group and that that wasn't very scalable. And to get the volume that we wanted, we were going to have to make this a bit bigger. So we actually held our first large disruption night. We borrowed a little bit of funding from another project, the Creative Communities Network, and through that we were able to do a few things. So we kept the post-it note feedback. We essentially changed it slightly, so we weren't doing rosebud thorn anymore. We just had post-it notes and just write or draw whatever you wanted to on the post-it notes. We then had 3 artists, so we had a musician, a spoken word artist, and local historian Erin Farley come and give performances and responses to the space from different perspectives. And then finally, we had to collate and report. So this is my first slide with pictures on it. So up the top corner up here, you can see sort of the stage that we had set up with fairy lights in our amazing high mill space. Down at the bottom, we had huge, massive pieces of paper that had questions on like, well, what's the point of having a museum anyway? Like, is there a point in having a museum in this place? Thankfully, people said yes. And then at the top, sort of an example of one of the spaces we had, and people have stuck post-it notes to some of the interpretation. So when it came to collating it, it's a lot of post-it notes. It took about a month to individually decipher and type out and categorize all of the different post-it notes alongside doing the rest of my job. And Kate wonderfully introduced me to Miro boards. So at the bottom of the PowerPoint, you can see the full Miro board. So there's a frame per gallery, a frame per big sheet, a frame for the ones that I have no idea where they came from. And this one up top is a zoom in of one of the individual frames from our social history gallery. Now, you might be able to see, you might not be able to see. Some of them are quite polite. This is beautiful. It's simple but effective. Some of them are to do with the technological stuff in there, so the speaker isn't loud enough. Some of them are brutally honest, bit boring, brackets, sorry. Some of them we were expecting, like, please can we have more mannequins on the toilet? And some of them then were starting to highlight where they'd like more story. So some of them on there say things like, more stories of the working class would be good, ... because they were paid less, important part of the story, more required. So we got this is just one gallery and we got just about every perspective from it. And from there, we were able to start prioritizing.
So what we did was we got a Museum Galleries Scotland grant to undertake a phased process of intervention and long-term community engagement to update the ground floor galleries at Verdant Works. So this was focusing on the decolonisation of the interpretation and making the galleries more accessible for younger and the more geographically diverse audiences that we weren't quite attracting. And also to explain a bit more about the jute industry, because we're coming out of the generation where your parents or yourself were in the industry. So we needed to explain that a bit more. So Mel, our previous curator, had a really great follow-up conversation to our funding application with Sheila Asante from MGS, which really helped to shape our approach and make sure that what we were doing was going to be meaningful change going forward and not just a bit of interpretation that was going to change. In a nutshell, this project was going to re-record some of our audio, which Kim has already mentioned was breaking, to better represent the communities involved in the jute industry, create new interpretation in the key problem areas, and also replace the aging AV equipment. If you go on to the next one, that is a laser disc. I didn't know what one of those was. When it was installed in the museum 30 years ago, it was already outdated. So the fact that it had survived 30 years is insane. So on the previous board, we had a picture of the map. That black and white panel there is the interpretation we put around the map. So the original map had the uses of jute through time, hadn't explained the context, hadn't explained that it was coming from a sort of British viewpoint, and so therefore was not mentioning that it was used in the slave trade and slaves were used in some of the production processes. And then we've also added some questions at the bottom as well to make sure that people are still questioning the interpretation that we put in. And then this panel here on the right is a board that is under the sort of dioramas, thank you, in the second gallery. So in the second gallery, we've got some dioramas that show the processes of jute, but it's not the modern day processes, it is the old processes. And it came from a photograph album, and it was very important to explain that context.
So once that was done, we realized that we had like 2 years before we had to start doing a massive transformation project for real. So Mel had wanted to start this project for the longest time, and so she sort of wheeled her chair a bit closer to me and said, do you fancy doing some co-curation before you do Discovery Point Transformed? And I said yes. And then Mel left. So now the lovely David and Sophie are on this journey with me. So Mel had applied to the Turtleton Trust for a grant of about £18,500, which includes our staff time. The most expensive things are staff time and gallery, like the physical updating of the gallery. We do have money set aside to sort of support people who want to come and be a part of this project as well. So we're about here, about halfway through the project. It will hopefully be opening in September. But we started with another big public consultation. It wasn't quite a disruption night. It was an online form and also a questionnaire in the gallery that were identical that asked people general things about Verdant Works, but also really specific things about the gallery. So things like what stories would you expect to be here? What voices would you expect to hear within this gallery? And we'd chosen the India Gallery because it came up as one of the areas that could really help shift the perception of the whole museum. The Social History Gallery is still in my sights, but the India Gallery would help bring in more voices that we could then eke out throughout the museum. And there was a huge amount of opportunity for collaborative partnership as well. So we'd previously worked with various groups before we'd started as a project called Indian Summers. And there was sort of a very thin line between us, and I wanted to make that a much stronger line so that we could keep engaging with them. So this public consultation came back, and we're currently in our researching with our communities. Interestingly, the public does not necessarily want community groups to be writing interpretation. It's still very much viewed that should come from academics and from museums. However, the thing that they want the most is personal stories, which I find really interesting. So the way we've gone about it is reaching out to academic groups and individuals, but also into our local communities and those further afield as well, to try and collect personal stories, collect information in, and so then use that as a way to tell the stories. This has been really interesting as well and has helped inform all of our work with Discovery Point Transformed as well. So we're in the middle. If any of you are coming up to Verdant after lunch, please feel free to have a look around the India Gallery and then come and pick my brains about what we might be doing with it next afterwards. But just to wrap up.
So what's next? So we've got our eye on a couple of new spaces, current spaces that we need to update. So in the third gallery along, we've got an outdated game. We want to turn it into a crafting space and invite the community in and bring the community back into Verdant Works. We want to rebalance the social history gallery. As Kim says, she's very keen to do that. At the moment, it's kind of a juxtaposition between the jute barons and the workers, but from a Victorian perspective. And as we said the industry shut down in the 1990s. So we've got a long way that we can go with there. We want to bring more communities in and just continue on the work that we've started. That's us.